Groundbreaking research from the Institute of Cancer Research in London, funded by Breast Cancer Now, has discovered how breast cancer cells that spread to the lungs can wake up many years later, and a potential method to stop this happening. The research was published in the journal Nature Cancer, and it describes how changes in lung cells that happen as we get older actually stimulate these dormant breast cancer cells to start growing again. Now, breast cancer can be divided into cancers that are sensitive to estrogen positive, and those that aren't. And around 80% of breast cancers in the UK are ER positive, and around 45,000 women and men a year are diagnosed. But even after surgery, radiotherapy and chemotherapy to treat breast cancer, it can still come back in the future as metastatic disease. There may be rogue cells left behind that are sleeping in your blood, your bones, or distant organs like your liver or lungs that suddenly start to wake up and grow and form new cancers. And with ER positive cancers in particular, this can happen up to 30 years in the future. Now, when breast cancer does start to grow, there are treatments that can slow down the growth, but it cannot be cured because eventually the cancers develop resistance to all these new treatments. Now, scientists at the Institute of Cancer Research in London have found that a protein present in lung cells called PDGF-C has an important role in determining whether these sleeping cells wake up or not. What is PDGFC? Well, it stands for platelet-derived growth factor, and these are molecules that help to heal wounds, repair damaged blood vessels, and help blood vessels grow. Now, this is an important part of metastatic cancer development because any new cancer needs to have its own blood supply. There are several different types of PDGF, A, B, and C, for example, and a cell recognises them through a receptor, a bit like a lock and a key. The PDGF receptors are called tyrosine kinase receptors, which are found on the cell surface, and I'll come back to those receptors later on. But let's get back to the actual science. They found that in young mice, sleeping ER-positive breast cancer cells only produced a small amount of PDGFC. This was enough for the cells to stay alive, but not enough for them to start to grow and spread as a metastatic cancer. However, in older mice, there is more PDGFC available in the lung stroma, which stimulates these cancer cells to wake up and grow. But not only that, the cells themselves start to produce more PDGFC, which further increases growth. Now, this growth could potentially be blocked by drugs that stop PDGFC being recognised by the cell. It could even slow them down or prevent them happening in the future. And one possible drug is called Imatinib. Keep watching to find out more about Imatinib. But back to the science. Mice were treated with Imatinib both before and after the lung metastases had grown, and in both groups there was less cancer growth in the lungs. And this means that Imatinib could be used in the future to slow down or even stop the growth of lung mets in men and women with ER-positive breast cancers. But what is Imatinib? It's also known as Gleevec, and it's a tablet that's currently used to treat patients with blood cancers like chronic myeloid leukemia. And it works by blocking tyrosine kinase receptors. Remember those? And that can stop cancer cells from growing. If Imatinib could stop ER-positive breast cancer cells recognising PDGFC in the lungs of patients, it could be another treatment for metastatic breast cancer and another possible preventative treatment for women with early cancer and a high risk of recurrence. But we are a long way off from that at the moment. These trials have only been done in mice, and more studies will be needed to check that the dose is safe in humans and that it works in humans. But we are on the road. Now, like any drug, Imatinib does have side effects, very much like chemotherapy, so it's not as simple as taking paracetamol, but the risk may be worth the gains. Overall, it may be several years until we know if this works in humans, but I am filled with hope for women like me in the future. I've had ER-positive breast cancer twice, once as a stage 3 cancer whilst working as a breast cancer surgeon, and then again 2.5 years later as a local regional recurrence on my chest wall. There's a good chance that I will get metastatic disease in the future. When ER-positive cancers do spread, they eventually become resistant to the hormone blockers like tamoxifen and anastrozole, and they develop resistance to the CDK4 and 6 inhibitors like palbociclib. It would be incredible if this study leads to one more drug that can prevent that happening. And that's why funding for research centres like the ICR is so incredibly important, so they continue to carry out this groundbreaking work.